If you arrived in Venice before dawn, before the tourists and the cameras, before the noise of engines and rolling suitcases, you might think you'd stepped into a dream that forgot to wake up. The air tastes like salt. The mist is thick enough to hide the horizon, and beneath your feet, there is no earth, only wood, mud, and the memory of water. Venice is not supposed to exist, and yet for more than 1,500 years, it has. A city built on water, in defiance of everything gravity, geography, and common sense had to say. This is the story of how humans took an impossible landscape, a swamp, a lagoon, and built one of the most beautiful and enduring cities on Earth. It is a story about ingenuity, desperation, and the strange relationship between people and the elements that could destroy them. And maybe it's a mirror for the world we're building now, where survival will depend, once again, on learning to live with water. To understand why Venice exists, we have to begin with fear. In the 5th century, northern Italy was burning. The Western Roman Empire was collapsing. Germanic tribes, the Lombards, the Huns, they swept through the plains, looting, burning, enslaving. Ordinary people, farmers, traders, fishermen, fled from the mainland toward a place no army could follow, the marshes of the Venetian lagoon. It wasn't land exactly. It wasn't sea either. It was a maze of 118 low islands, separated by shallow channels and sandbanks. Mosquito-ridden, treacherous, nearly uninhabitable. But it was safe, because ships couldn't enter without grounding, and horses couldn't cross water. And so, in that mess of mud and reeds, refugees began to build. Not monuments, not marble palaces, just shelters, huts on stilts. The first Venetians were survivors, not visionaries. They weren't chasing glory. They were running from extinction. But sometimes, what begins as desperation becomes destiny. Building Venice was like trying to write a poem on a wave. The problem was simple and impossible at once. The lagoon's ground wasn't solid. It was a mixture of silt and clay that shifted with every tide. Any structure placed on top would sink, tilt, collapse. Yet the Venetians found a way. They invented a foundation system unlike anything the world had seen. They cut trees, millions of them, from the forests of northern Italy, Slovenia, and Croatia. Oak, larch, alder. They ferried the logs through rivers and across the sea, then drove them vertically into the soft mud, one by one, using human muscle and primitive cranes. Each pile reached down until it hit the compact clay beneath the lagoon, a layer firm enough to hold weight. On top of these submerged forests, they built wooden platforms, then laid stone and brick. The secret was the water itself. Submerged wood, deprived of oxygen, doesn't rot. Instead, it petrifies over centuries, hardening like stone. The lagoon preserved what would otherwise decay, a paradox that made the impossible possible. Every building in Venice, every church, every palace, every quiet house where laundry flutters over a canal, stands on these invisible forests. 1 billion trees, sleeping underwater, holding up a city of marble. By the 9th century, Venice was no longer a refuge. It was a republic, an independent city-state ruled not by kings but by merchants. They built shipyards, workshops, docks, and an economy fueled by trade. The lagoon, once a hiding place, became the gateway to the world. From here, Venetian ships sailed to Constantinople, Alexandria, Damascus. They brought back silk, glass, spices, and ideas. With each voyage, Venice grew richer, bolder, stranger. The architecture began to mirror the city's spirit, part east, part west, part dream. By the 13th century, it was the heart of a maritime empire, its ships controlling the Mediterranean, its bankers financing wars and kingdoms. But the more powerful Venice became, the more it had to fight the enemy it could never escape: the sea. Venice is a city in negotiation with water, always has been. Every tide is a conversation between creation and collapse. If the water rises too high, homes flood. If it drops too low, the foundations dry and crack. If rivers bring too much sediment, canals clog. If too little, the lagoon deepens and the sea rushes in. For centuries, Venetians managed this balance like priests tending a sacred ritual. They built embankments, redirected rivers, dredged canals. They established a powerful institution, the Magistrato alle Acque, the Magistrate of Waters, whose only task was to keep the lagoon alive. The sea was not their enemy, but their partner, a volatile one. When storms came from the Adriatic, Venetians knew the city could drown overnight. Even today, the sound of the sirens warning of acqua alta, the high water, sends a chill through every alley. Venice has always been sinking, just slowly enough for people to believe it wasn't. If you could strip Venice down to its bones, it would look like something between a forest and a ship. Beneath the Basilica of San Marco, beneath the Doge's palace, beneath the smallest house on the smallest canal, lie thousands of piles driven into the mud, bound together by stone and brick arches. The entire city behaves like one enormous raft. Builders learned to distribute weight, to let the city flex with the tides rather than fight them. And the choice of materials mattered. Istrian stone, dense, white, nearly impervious to salt, was used for facades and foundations. It reflects light like marble, but resists erosion. That's why the palaces along the Grand Canal still stand, their reflections shimmering like ghosts in the water. And yet, for all its brilliance, the system is delicate. The lagoon's equilibrium depends on the tides, the sediment, even the wind. Alter one thing, a channel deepened, a river diverted, and the whole organism shifts. Venice isn't just a city. It's an ecosystem that happens to have humans living in it. Then came the modern world. In the 20th century, industrialization changed the lagoon. Factories rose in Mestre and Marghera. Deep channels were cut to let oil tankers pass, disturbing centuries of balance. At the same time, groundwater was pumped from aquifers beneath the city. The ground sank faster. By the 1960s, Venice was literally collapsing. Then in 1966, the Great Flood hit. The water rose more than 6 feet above normal levels. St. Mark's Square disappeared. Homes filled with seawater. Priceless frescoes peeled from walls. It was a warning, and the world began to pay attention. Scientists and engineers launched one of the most ambitious civil projects in history. MOSE, a system of massive steel gates designed to close the lagoon from the Adriatic during extreme tides. It took decades to build, plagued by delays and corruption scandals. But in 2020, it finally worked. For the first time in centuries, the city held back the sea. But the victory felt complicated, because in saving itself from water, Venice risks losing its identity, the delicate dance that made it alive. There's another side to Venice's construction, not the wood or stone, but the people who kept it standing. Generations of carpenters, masons, and boat builders. Fishermen who learned to read tides like timepieces. Families who've patched the same crumbling walls for centuries. In Venice, maintenance is creation. Every repaired brick, every repainted door, every cleaned canal. It's an act of faith. Even today, crafts like brick-owl maintenance, the wooden posts that line the canals, continue almost unchanged from the Middle Ages. The city is a living museum not because it refuses to change, but because its change is invisible, constant, and human. Walk through the narrow calle at dusk, and you'll hear hammers echoing across the water. Not tourists, but Venetians, rebuilding their city again and again, one tide at a time. Venice's biggest challenge isn't engineering anymore, it's meaning. More than 20 million tourists arrive each year. Cruise ships the size of apartment blocks used to pass within meters of its ancient facades. Local families move away. Too expensive, too crowded. Today, there are more beds for visitors than there are residents. Some say Venice has become a museum of itself, preserved, photographed, adored. When you stand alone on a foggy bridge at midnight, it still feels alive. Because the water still moves. Because the foundations, those wooden piles buried centuries ago, still hold. Because somewhere, beneath the weight of history, the city continues to breathe. Venice was never meant to last this long. And maybe that's its greatest lesson. It teaches that fragility is not weakness, it's endurance refined. That beauty can be practical. That survival can be poetic. In an age of rising seas and vanishing coastlines, Venice is not just history, it's prophecy. Its builders faced the same fear we face now, water as both life and threat. Their answer was not to conquer it, but to coexist, to build with it, not against it. Maybe the future of our cities will depend on remembering that the ground doesn't have to be solid to stand upon, that permanence is an illusion, but balance is real. As the sun sets over the lagoon, the sky turns the color of rusted gold. The bells of San Giorgio toll in the distance. The gondoliers call out to each other, their voices carrying over the ripples. And for a moment, you can feel the centuries collapse into the present. Refugees, merchants, engineers, artists, all standing together on this improbable raft of stone and wood. Venice was born from fear, built from ingenuity, and sustained by love. It is, quite literally, the city that refuses to sink. But the truth is, it is sinking, slowly, gracefully, like a candle burning at both ends. And perhaps that's the secret of its beauty, that something so fragile could last so long, that something built on water could teach the world how to endure. So when you leave Venice, when the boat pulls away and the city begins to dissolve in the mist, remember this: every tower, every bridge, every reflection in the canal is not a miracle. It's the sum of 1,000 years of stubborn hope. And if they could build this, here on the water, with nothing but mud, wood, and imagination, then maybe we can too.